Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Ken Long, Angus Fletcher, and Mark Matthews working on case studies with our Nordic Leadership Partnership Project for Peace in perpetuity or something like that. Uh, I want to give everybody a quick chance to check in, and then we'll summarize the case study and then do some focused questioning with Angus and Mark. So, Ken Long, retired Army Colonel, professor of logistics, creativity, and I guess change management at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. But I'm in my 45th year of service, and at some point I'm going to get it right, or they're going to fire me. Angus, what's going on with you today? You look great.
Thanks, man. Well, I always look great when I'm around you, man. It brings out my inner spark. So, I'm Angus Fletcher. I'm a professor of story science at Ohio State's Project Narrative. And I'm interested in narrative cognition, which is this part of the brain that makes us smarter and more resilient than computers and drives things like creativity.
What's going on, Mark?
Ken Angus, happy to be here. I am a towards the end of my time PhD student, and I'm also a coach, and where I study how we create a narrative identity that empowers us to have the full capacity of our thinking. And currently, I'm on a tour, U.S. nationwide tour, traveling to all 50 states to collect stories to figure out how we build that in our society today. Happy to be here with you guys.
Awesome. So, what I've asked these guys to do is to pre read my case study of stories of NCOs that I've known from my Army career that were foundational to me and shaped the rest of my career. And then to, ask some leading questions from their perspectives. And then we want to blend these with our Nordic partners to see what we can discover about the stories we tell and the different lenses we can use to understand them or understand ourselves or at least appreciate them. I don't know if I understand myself any better at the end of stories, but it's sometimes it feels that way. So I entered the Army in the 1980s. That's 7 or 8 years after the Vietnam experience, and all of the young soldiers and young sergeants from Vietnam that came back and survived the hate speech from their fellow citizens and then stayed in and are now the senior NCOs became the cadre of non-commissioned officers that taught me how to soldier, took care of me as I learned my way through the process, and really set an example for my professional career as an enlisted soldier. I achieved the rank of sergeant, and then I had a first sergeant who said, "You either need to fish or cut bait. You've got a 4-year degree. I want you to go to officer candidate school or just get out of my Army. I want you all in." And so that sergeant got me into officer candidate school, and 6 months later, I, came back to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, and gave him a salute and a gold coin for taking care of me. The way he prepped me for that experience made all the difference and gave me the confidence and skills to survive officer candidate school. I should also say he saved my career because he he spoke up for me when I was getting an Article 15 in front of my captain. Now, I didn't realize that you weren't allowed to have a closet full of weapons in the barracks. I didn't know that that was not a thing. And so they did a health and welfare inspection, found all my weapons. The company commander was going to throw me in jail, and the first sergeant said, "No, I think that was, I think his story is probably true. He's just dumb and didn't know it was against the SOP." And I believe him when he says he was going to take them home to his brother in his martial arts collection. And so, I lied and he swore to it, and it saved my career. And I was able to learn something about having somebody's back when if they judge you to be a soldier somewhere inside you, that you find ways to help bring that soldier out. You can put up with some of the childish indiscretions of youth. Well, after officer candidate school, I found myself in Korea working for some infantry commanders that were amazing. But I had a first sergeant of infantry, a little ragbag guy named Ernie Johnson, who taught me two really important things. We were doing another health and welfare inspection. This time I was doing the inspecting, and he pulled me over and showed me this kid's athletic running shoes, and they were really beaten up and dirty and ragged. And he just says to me, "Sir, God forbid something happened to this kid and we have to ship all his equipment home to his mom, and she opens the box and looks at those shoes, what would she think about us as his leaders that we would let her son run physical training in shoes like that? Didn't we care about that kid? How would she feel? And I never forgot about that sense of personal stewardship and custodianness and personal responsibility that our NCOs feel about their soldiers. You know, they stay in the units, and officers come and go on a yearly basis, getting certified and checking all the blocks and taking care of their career, but the NCOs stay. And they see all the changes coming through, and they're there. And so I learned something there. The other thing he told me was that be careful of the peacetime Army and its tendency to get rid of Category 4 enlistees. These are guys that maybe have some colorful pasts, maybe not as well educated, not such good grades. He says, you know, we tend to throw those guys out and purge them during times of peace, but in times of war, they disproportionately perform the acts of courage that win battles, save lives, and you need to help those guys find their home and pull out the soldier inside. And I knew exactly what he was talking about because that had kind of happened to me in a small way. So I learned that from Ernie Johnson. Well, my follow-on assignment after there was to go to a Ranger battalion where my platoon sergeant, the legendary Joe Madison, had been one of the lead instructors from Mountain Ranger Camp, where he was the master of the rope. And he taught the regiment how to do mountaineering safely. He wrote the SOP for how to cross rivers with a 3-rope bridge. And so one day we were out performing some discretionary training at night and crossed the Chattahoochee River down there in Georgia with a 3-rope bridge, and I'm pulling Rangers out of the river on the other side thinking things are going really well. And I pull this guy out. It's the battalion commander. I said, oh, he snuck in and was observing training. I thought we did pretty good. We had a 20-kilometer escape and evasion exercise after that. We got home cold, wet, tired, and hungry, but feeling pretty good. At an officer professional development session later that night, he stood up and said, I attended some training last night in river crossing with a Ranger platoon, and I was thinking, here we go, it's going to be all good. He said, I don't know whether to throw that guy out of the battalion or out of the Army altogether for violating our SOP and putting soldiers at risk. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. Well, my company commander, Stan McChrystal, intervened and said, hey, Long's platoon is going to do an OPD tomorrow to show how to do this correctly. And so he kind of saved my career by giving me an opportunity. And they said, you're on your own, dude. Fish or cut bait. My platoon sergeant found out about that, and he discovered that the regiment had created a new SOP because the previous month a couple Rangers had been killed in a river crossing in Panama. And so the regimental commander brought the battalion commanders together. They rewrote the SOP, and then they handed it out to the battalions. But our operations shop never gave it to us in the line units. So we were operating off an old SOP. So we got a copy of the new SOP. Joe Madison looked at it and shook his head and said, this is horrible. And he said, sir, I got this. So I had nothing to do except remain in shock as I contemplated a changing career and hopefully avoiding jail time. And Joe Madison had the platoon in the tree line, and all of the officers in the battalion were there. And Joe Madison ran through that SOP in 3 phases. Phase 1, he did it by the numbers without speaking, and they showed how to cross the river according to the new SOP. And then he said, gentlemen, you've just seen a flawless execution of this SOP, which is a horrible SOP, is going to get Rangers killed, and here's why. And then he went back and they went step by step through the new SOP, and he showed where every mistake and malfunction was. You're using the wrong knot here. You're having the guy approach the rope from the wrong direction. He's going to get pulled under. And he showed about 30 different ways that thing was bad. And he said, now here's how it should be done. And he showed him the new SOP that he had written that night and demonstrated why it was an improvement in every way. He then gave printed copies of that to the battalion commander in the S3 shop and said, "Sir, this concludes our demonstration." The regiment changed the SOP on the basis of that, and I was just in absolute awe, and still to this day in a state of wonder how good that guy was. I learned from Joe Madison how to turn soldiers into sergeants, sergeants into senior sergeants, how to care for equipment and soldiers, how to be loyal, but also how to be relentless in upholding absolute standards in preparation and performance. He used to pull the platoon together before a field exercise and have them dump all of their rucksacks and their A and B equipment bags. And if a soldier had something that he wasn't supposed to have, or didn't have something he was supposed to have, his whole squad would have a 12-mile road march with Sergeant First Class Joe Madison and then re-inspect later that night. And so no one ever went to the field missing equipment or with extra equipment, so that you could always rely on grabbing a bag and going, knowing that it was packed properly and that you were ready to go. And that was just his discipline. He went on to be a senior command sergeant major for a 4-star headquarters in Europe before he retired, and that was not surprising to me. I just learned so much from him about what it takes to prepare soldiers and care for your lieutenants as members of the team. And his standard of excellence and professionalism stayed with me for the rest of my life, and was a standard that I'm still trying to achieve, and that I'm trying to teach officers to understand what their sergeants are really like in the Army. So I don't want to take all your time, Angus, but those were some of the formative experiences of my life with some great sergeants, and I am relinquishing the baton to you. Fire away.
Well, that was outstanding, Ken. Thank you for sharing. The first thing I just want to note at the top of that is one of the things that I think that story illustrates is how leadership is putting yourself in the place of others. And I think many people mistake leadership as thinking about themselves, their own success. Leadership is thinking about the success of others. And you not only gave us examples of these NCOs who did that, but you yourself did that while you were telling the story. Because at no single time in that story did you give any examples of your own leadership, but you led through the examples of other people's leadership. And so you allowed us to see what it was to be a leader by completely removing yourself from those stories and allowing us to step into those stories and imagine ourselves. So that's just the first thing I wanted to note. I don't know if you have a response to that. I don't even know if you did that
Yeah,
consciously.
I see what you're saying now. I always felt like I was on the receiving end from those guys, and that was a privilege. And I always wondered, why are you doing that for me? Yeah, I had a real imposter syndrome then, and still do. I never feel I'm good enough, but I'm always so I'm just going to try my best if I can. And something maybe in me they resonated with. They respected the intention, and all of those guys did things for me they didn't have to do. I learned early that with senior sergeants, all they ever have to do is exactly what you tell them. Like if you're not really worth it, they'll just say, "All right, sir, what specifically and exactly do you want me to do?" And if they adopt that mindset, you're done, because no officer can possibly give complete, accurate orders on how to do things. And so, if they don't bring you onto the team, you're done. But if they think you're on the team and you're accepted, they will move mountains for you. And that is probably, for me, the greatest reward I ever got, or award I ever got, was that I was accepted by the NCOs in spirit, and the loyalty that I got from those guys. Just I'm still trying to pay that stuff back. That's why I can't retire until the debt is fully paid. But yeah, it was Ernie Johnson. He helped me see the world through other people's eyes, and he internalized that, and I just kind of adopted that approach to listen more and say less. So yeah, over.
Well, I mean, I think that the deep thing here is that people outside the military don't understand how almost all military leadership comes from the NCOs. And people outside the military think that leadership comes from the generals. And the reason that the NCOs are successful in that role is to be an NCO is always to put the institution ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're the guy with the 4 stars, it's only natural to put yourself ahead of the institution because you
Yeah.
focus, on. And if you think about the stories you told us, one of those stories was think about what would happen in this kid's mom's mind if a box came back with these shoes. Now he wasn't thinking about himself; he was thinking about that mom. When you were in that situation where you were in trouble and you needed to get that bridge fixed, the platoon sergeant, he was not thinking about himself, right? He didn't need to do anything in that situation. No one was paying any attention whatsoever. It did not affect his career the slightest if he did nothing. But he was thinking of you, and he was also thinking about all the other rangers who might die because of this new SOP. And so he was thinking, and so he was leading by, again, not being himself. He was leading by withdrawing himself from the equation. And, one thing we know about people who have the ability to withdraw themselves from the equation is they're more creative thinkers because they're not hemmed in by their own fears and hopes. And instead, they can open up to see the entire possibility space. And so I just think it's fascinating, Ken, that you are role modeling what they did. And they are in general kind of role modeling to all of us who actually the people who we think are leaders are often not the real leaders. And the real leaders are the people who you don't know because they're purposefully withdrawing themselves from the equation.
Yeah, I mean that's really true. I think about the strict hierarchy in the army that goes from the general tells the lieutenant general, who tells the brigadier general, who tells the colonel, who tells the major, and that goes all the way down the line until a sergeant receives that order, and he's the guy who cannot say no. The officers come and go, but the guy who cannot say no is the sergeant. And let me tell you who the first line leader is: the corporal or the buck sergeant. The youngest, newest sergeant. I remember the day that I went from being a specialist E4 to a sergeant E5, and now I was put in charge of a squad of guys who had just been my friends the day before. That was the largest shift in perspective in my 45-year career that I ever experienced at that young age, to be, because nothing in your life prepares you from being one of the guys, around 25 years old or whatever, smoking and joking, waiting to be told, and now suddenly you're in charge and there's nobody else you can put. Well, hey, I told him to. No, sergeant, you got it. And so you think about Harry Truman, and the buck stops here. In the army, the buck stops with the sergeant. That's where any work is going to be done. And yeah, officers come and go, the sergeants endure. Here's how good those guys are. When we there's always the story of the second lieutenant, the butter bar, the young dumb lieutenant shows up with can't wear his helmet right and all that. And a lot of that is true. If I am telling the truth. And we assigned that lieutenant to a platoon with a senior sergeant and about 40 soldiers and other sergeants in that unit. And our squads and platoons are what win wars. Those guys are so good that they will still accomplish every mission while also taking a second lieutenant and training him how to tie his shoes and wear his helmet and don't walk in front of a bus, and turn that lieutenant into a first lieutenant or a captain and hopefully a great officer. That we decide to put the most important part of that lieutenant's training in the hands of NCOs while they're trying to get the missions accomplished. And they're able to do both of those things. And they do it selflessly, humbly, indirectly. But if you learn to listen, those guys, are really taking good care of you. Yeah, it's interesting. The responsibility hierarchy is almost inverted in terms of where the real where the real work gets done. And you know, the best generals I ever saw are guys who understood that and never forgot. And once they had sort of made it, they tried to infuse that, hey, you're NCO Corps. That's not just words on a page. The guys that have been around actually know that that's what makes the difference. And that's why, you know, of all the, as we were looking at the set of case studies, the most important things for me was what I learned from those guys. They were older than me, been around a lot longer than me. They were going to be there when I left, and yet they did more than they had to, and that was really a sacred and profound gift in my view. And
Well,
I went to officer school because the sergeant said you need to go. Yeah, go ahead.
well, I got to check out now, Ken, but this has been an honor to do this first part of our conversation with you. I wish you the best with Mark in the extent of this conversation. Mark, and don't let him just evade and give credit to everybody else for leadership. Make him at some point tell his own story
Uh-oh.
as though he's the actual protagonist in it, doing something as opposed to this hapless guy on the sidelines who's just lucky that everyone
I'm
else
just
is
cargo
leaving.
here. I'm just
Right,
cargo. I'm in riding in the back row.
exactly.
Hey, you
All right,
take good
gents. I'll
care,
see you
man.
later.
Yeah, we'll see you. Hey, let me go and shift it over to you, Mark. I know you had some questions for me. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, Ken, I'd like to make a note of what came to me as you and Angus were discussing. Angus mentioned that great leaders put the institution above themselves. And I would actually contend that it's a little bit different than that from my study of narrative alignment. I think it's actually that they integrate themselves with the institution.
Yeah.
And I think the amazing thing about that is when Angus said, don't let, Ken not take credit for what you've done in the story. I think psychologically in reflection, you actually do receive the meaning and purpose benefits as if you did take credit because you've integrated yourself with the institution.
Yeah.
And I think that's
That's
really powerful. But it's really important because if people are choosing to put the institution truly above themselves, at some point, those stories no longer align and they develop resentment towards the institution, not successful integration. And as a result of that, that's how they become bitter and start, kind of giving up or not going above like you demonstrated. So I thought just adding that is amazing.
yeah.
What you showed in that story.
You know something that I learned from my NCOs. I heard it from them first, and then tried to just live it that way. Was I had a sergeant major who just told me, "Sir, we are responsible for everything the Army does or does not do, whether it's in our job description or not." And he told me the secret of his success. He says, I am a walking inspection. Wherever I go, I am always comparing what I see to the standard, and I don't walk past something that's not right. I'm looking to confirm excellence, and if I don't see it, then I help them get better. So every time you walk through the unit area, it should be better than you found it. That you're not just checking compliance and scoring them and say, aha, you did this wrong or whatever. No, it's a better unit as a result of how you inspected. And he said, you got to start with the position that you believe in your bones, that these guys are working as hard as they can, as best they can, and what they got is what they got, and that if you don't respect that, then you think that you can judge them and grade them. No, your job is to make the whole team better. When I learned to adopt that mentality, ended up becoming kind of fearless in terms of giving my opinions or recommendations as appropriate on things that mattered. I really started looking at, well, why does the Army do it this way? Why do we do it that way? And I really felt like I was responsible for everything the Army did, and I was willing to take, accountability and responsibility for all that. And I would do my best to fix things that I didn't think were right, and I would trust the Army to decide what to do with my recommendations. So there was a very strong alignment and identity merge I really do feel like I became the institution. It became part of me. It was, I am the Army. We are the Army. It's our Army and what we stand for. And then you sort of evaluate others, in the profession, say, do you feel that way? Well, why not? And what else do we need? What else do you need to know about the Army, young lieutenant or young soldier, before you fully commit and and go all in? What else do you need to know? Because I want to help you understand what we feel about our identity at the core of who the soldier is. And so something I wrote in that little essay, and at the end was sort of the realization, and I don't know if I'd ever said it exactly that way, but leadership is not the rank you wear, but it's what you do. And and so that way, the leadership is in action. It emerges from how you respond to things. And I have noticed that when guys either gave up on themselves or gave up on the Army and became bitter and separated, that it really was an unhappy place, because you only can see the differences and you get bitter, and that's no way to be. So yeah, I would agree with you on what the NCOs have really done is they see the NCO Corps, all of the NCOs, as sort of that single collective entity, and their NCO creed features the word responsibility and professionalism like 11 times each, and that really comes through in the way they work to prepare equipment and soldiers and accomplish missions and care for our institution. Officers come and go, the NCOs endure, and that's, I think, the biggest difference between our Army and other armies around the world that I've seen and served with, is the trust and confidence and leadership role that we put into our enlisted leaders, and genuinely listen to what they say. Those guys are incredible. Over.
Wow, that's beautiful, Ken. Absolutely beautiful. And it's inspiring to me to hear that, because I've had the pleasure of being in organizations where I felt like I was part of it. And it's so amazing how it calls you to the better of your nature when you're in that organization and when you're integrated. I wanted to highlight a theme actually that came out in your story, and as you were talking about it, something that arose, something we talk about a lot in the psychology world, which is the elusive nature of certainty, and how certainty can actually drive us to make really, really terrible decisions, because certainty tells our brain it's time to take action. And I was thinking about the punishments you might have occurred, especially for crossing the bridge. I don't know if you mentioned it here, but in that story, you actually hadn't received that copy of the new
Yeah.
the new protocol that you're supposed to be using. And so in that situation, if we pull out of it, you could take responsibility. Maybe you could have done more to make sure you had updated, sure. But at the heart of it there, somehow the communication systems had an issue. And what I thought was so powerful was thinking about the person who had created the new plan. They were able to pull out of that certainty driven, problem focused tunnel vision to opportunity creation. They were able to see beyond that and expand their mind. And that's the cool thing that Angus teaches us, right, with narratives, is that we allow ourselves to broaden back out through the narrative to unlock creativity. It's naturally there if we can broaden back out.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really powerful, how you'd brought that up. And I'm just curious, based on this story, do you have any insight from this into how you might have been able to focus more in your time on opportunity creation, as opposed to problem focused, just solve the problem?
Yeah, well, the backstory to that training event was something like this: that we had some airborne operations scheduled off the base, and then for whatever reasons, planes got diverted or bad weather, and so we had like 2 days of just opportunities came open with nothing planned as a replacement, and McChrystal told us, "Hey guys, You got 2 days to develop your own training plan on whatever it is you want to do. So I immediately went to the NCOs and says, what is it that we want to do for the platoon? And then they came up with this thing where we're going to do a long road march, do an ambush, do a retrograde, cross a river with the bridges, then escape and evade, and really have a 48-hour stress event. And so we jammed as much stuff in there as we could. And so we went through our regular planning and preparation for all that stuff. And so in the area of certainty, what's really kind of interesting is that in the Ranger Battalion, the world's most elite light infantry, there is a lot of certainty in the fact that everybody knows the standard, that the SOPs are published, and everybody knows them to the nth degree. And because of your ability to rely on the certainty of the level of training and commitment, you're then actually free in a moment to see, hey, what's different or what's exceptional or what can I do to take advantage of this very strong base of training and certainty. Now, there can be at that cutting edge genuine moments of surprise if you're not careful. Like if you over rely on the certainty of your training and your SOP and you just think, well, this is just routine, it's going to be just like we always did, you lose that mindful moment. You're not looking for the thing that makes this an ambush, or you thought you were ambushing them, they're ambushing you. And so when you learn to walk point as the lead element of that patrol, you end up right on that cutting edge between certainty and uncertainty. There's a little chaos wave that sits there where you have all of the certainty of your planning and rehearsal and training, and you think you know what the enemy posture is, but you're always scanning that environment for even the smallest detail that suggests something is not quite right. You're trying to feel your way through the fog to confirm or deny what you think is true, but you have a healthy skepticism because it's life or death. And so I think the the training and the emphasis on being certain about some things, it doesn't make you more aware of the environment, but it can. But you got to learn how to hold both of those ideas in your head at the same time. On the one hand, we're the most highly trained organization that's ever done this, and we are amazing and no weak spots. At the same time, I have no idea what I'm getting ready to walk into, and I better be alert, stay alive. And so you can go too far one way or the other. Rely on your animal instincts to get you out of trouble and disregard your training, or you could emphasize only the training and think this is a routine event. Those lessons that I learned in a tactical unit with squads and platoons as infantrymen, I found to be the same kinds of mentalities at the largest levels of an organization where I was, planning large, complex projects, to be very sure that I understood what we thought we knew, how we thought we knew it, what the limits of that confidence would be, and then to look for disconfirming evidence. What would have to happen in the world to convince me my plan wasn't working? You see, there's some literature on high reliability organizations that is instructive in that area too. But yeah, this whole idea of certainty as if you're going to remove doubt, no, it's just that you are almost compartmentalizing the doubt, if I can say it that way. So walking in the fog of war really brings to mind both the light and the dark. The certainty of training, the uncertainty about what's around the next corner. Yeah.
Wow. I have a statement that came out when you were saying that, to integrate everything we just talked about in the last 15 minutes. And I'm curious what you think of this statement. When the person or team member, when the person is integrated with the institution, certainty creates the foundation for creativity.
Yeah.
When the person is not integrated with the institution, certainty creates a home to rest on, leaving creativity at the door. What do you think of that?
I really like it. What I immediately jumped into my mind was Archimedes. He said, "You give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and a fulcrum, and I can move the earth." And so, one half of that equation is the certainty that you can anchor on. That gives you a base for applying work in the world into a certain direction. If you don't have that certainty, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. You're not getting traction. You're generating heat and light, but no work. So, in my view, the amount of certainty you have is sort of what gives you traction and allows you to begin to make progress in a certain way. And it becomes something that you can rely on, like the foundation of a house or a structure that gives you support. It can't be blind faith. It has to be, measured and everything has a, breaking point or a tension point. And at the same time, not only does it give you a base to operate from, but when you're out in the fog of war and you need that extra, that sense of certainty about where is safety, where is sanctuary, how can I get there, it can often give you that extra motivation or energy or inspiration to find your way out of a jam. So I think there's a lot to that relationship between certainty and effective action and inspiration. Yep, I would agree with your statement.
Love it, Ken. It's been super inspiring. I guess I just ask you one final question. If you had to give if this was a story that you were, going to publish in a book somewhere, what would you title the chapter of this story, of this segment?
Um, I would. There's probably a toss up between. The word is preparation. We have a process in the Army we go through: plan, prepare, execute, and assess. That the plan just has to be good enough to get you moving, but that preparation is what makes the difference when you go out and meet the world. And were you prepared for the contingencies? Did you have other resources ready to go? Or did you believe that the plan was going to be the way it worked? So, if you want to execute a plan well, it really comes back to how well you prepared. Did you get your right equipment? Did you rehearse? Did you try different contingencies? And then, if you did that, then your plan has a chance of succeeding when you actually put it into execution. And then finally, the assessment. How well did that go? How well did you plan, prepare, and execute? What else could we have done better? So that relentless pursuit of improvement, continuous improvement. So I guess preparation would be the noun. But as I think of my NCOs, I really think of care and feeding. Because that's what they do. Officers kind of plan the grand scheme of things, but officers prepare. And what that means is they're caring for the soldiers and the equipment, and they're feeding them so that they're nourished and that we have all our stuff. But it also has that sense of pride, of ownership and responsibility and nurturing the total human. That really is what stands out for me about NCOs, is the degree to which they care. So I would think I would probably call this, this case study, if I was to title it, I would say the care and feeding of your people is the lesson that I think kind of ties all that stuff together. Care and feeding.
I love it. Love it. I think that was great. Is there anything else that you wanna bring
No,
up
I
or
think
talk about?
I think that's about a good place for us to get to closure on. Really genuinely appreciate your time, and you always ask me such good questions that make me look at the same old elephant but through a new lens. It's always a new elephant when I talk to you, because you're showing me ways to look at it that I hadn't thought of. So I really enjoy our time together, and looking forward to our next chat. And you take good care. I'm gonna check out here in Kansas and go. I actually have a soccer practice to go to here in a little bit, and I'm gonna do some care and feeding of those young soccer players. I got my 6-year-olds are practicing today, so we're gonna go do some care and feeding of the young ones. So take
I
care.
love it. I love it.
All
Thank
right,
you,
Ben.
Ken.
All
It's
right.
been great. Yeah,
We'll see you, and off we go.
I'll see you later.